Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This week on Semi-Serious, I want to talk about culture shock. So culture shock is something that I have a lot of experience with, which unfortunately does not mean that it's any easier for me to deal with, but it does mean that I can usually be aware of it when I am feeling it or when I'm experiencing it. After traveling for fun, volunteering, and straight up moving my entire life overseas to another continent, I have had probably more than my fair share of culture shock experiences, but it has been particularly difficult for me lately, and a lot of it can be boiled down to some very simple but not necessarily easy to deal with causes. Before we get too far into it, I do want to make sure that we're all on the same page, so let's take a minute to define our terms. Culture shock is defined as the feeling of disorientation experienced by someone when they are suddenly subjected to an unfamiliar culture, way of life, or set of attitudes. I think this definition is a little bit lacking though, so for the purposes of this video, because what's the point of having your own YouTube channel except to be the arbiter of your own reality? Seriously, what is the point? We will be using a modified definition of my own invention from the dictionary of me. And that definition goes a little something like this. The feeling of disorientation experienced by someone when they are suddenly or gradually subjected to a culture, way of life, or set of attitudes that do not align with their own. It seems like small changes, but they matter, and we're gonna get into why here in this video. Now that we've got our terms figured out, let's get straight into this video about the things that I wish I would have known about culture shock before picking up my whole life and moving to a different country. Not that knowing any of them would really have helped that much, because as with any hard thing, the only way out is through. No shortcuts here, unfortunately, just some good old-fashioned pain. So let's get started. Number 1, language matters. While this one might seem obvious, and I definitely did expect it to some extent since I was moving from the US to Germany, and I knew that there was going to be some sort of a language barrier there, at least at first, I didn't really know what this was going to mean for me after a year now, over a year, of living and working in Germany. Like I said, have traveled before, and so I knew that there was going to be some difficulty for me in communicating with people, even trying to do everyday mundane kind of tasks. But what I didn't expect was how difficult it was going to be for me to not feel like I could communicate, not feel like I could communicate myself well with other people in a place that was supposed to be home. Communication is something that I've always been pretty good at, especially written communication, and I didn't realize how big a part of myself and my identity that was until it was taken away in the form of not being able to speak the language despite my best efforts. And even though I've improved a lot in my German since I moved here, basically I didn't realize until I couldn't talk to people how important that was for me to be able to connect with people, which sounds really silly to say out loud now, but trust me, the struggle is very real. It's really difficult to consider yourself progressing in a language when you have a hard time understanding people, like at the grocery store. It causes me a lot of anxiety to have to like answer the door, answer the phone, communicate with people in public, which is not something that I'm really used to. I was always really good at communication, spent a lot of time in customer service positions, so that aspect of my identity being taken away wasn't really something that I anticipated, and I really didn't anticipate what that was going to mean for me when it came to figuring out where and how I belong in this new place. Number 2, if you didn't have purpose before, you won't have it now, necessarily. One of the most frequently asked questions of me now that I'm here is why I'm here, which is a perfectly valid question. After all, I don't speak the language, I didn't study it in school, I don't have any family here, I really didn't know anybody here. aside from Brady when I moved. I didn't have a job when I first got here, and I wasn't a student. It didn't make a lot of sense for me to be here. And honestly, the honest and pretty controversial answer is that I moved here to be with Brady because I love him and I want to be with him. So the next assumption when I tell people that I came here to be with my now fiance is that he must be German. And of course he's not. We're both Americans, and while I'm super glad that we're here and I'm so thankful for being in a country that has such good infrastructure and that has been so welcoming to both of us, it wasn't ever really on our radar. It was sort of, we landed here on accident and ended up staying. All that to say that I left a life behind in the US, pretty much my whole life, my friends and most of my family behind in the US. I was hoping to start a career here in Germany that after a long time and many months of trying, I feel like I'm actually finally starting to like get traction on, which is exciting and motivating. So yeah, I left my whole life and moved here. A lot of romantic ideas in my head about what my career was gonna look like and what my life was gonna look like. Feeling like I didn't have a lot of purpose in the US and hoping to come here and kind of have the change of scenery and the change of culture fix everything. And of course that's not gonna be the case. You can't just go to a different place and assume that your life is gonna be different. You're still the same person. And those problems aren't gonna go away just because you are in a different country. Letting go of a lot of those ideas that I first had about what my life was gonna look like here was really difficult and kind of painful. But ultimately the reality is that you have to create your purpose wherever you are and as you are. You can't just do the same thing in a different place and expect the outcome to be different, because it turns out that's not how it works. The reality is that some places do offer a better starting point than others, and the US is definitely one of those places. But if you don't work hard, and by you I mean me, if I wasn't willing to work hard, if I wasn't willing to put in the time and the effort to be successful, I wasn't gonna become successful, because the world doesn't really owe me anything, it turns out. I get the opportunity to make the life that I want, and culture shock aside, that's a pretty cool fucking opportunity, so I'm happy. And yeah, I realize as I'm talking about these that, like, if it seems pretty entitled for me to be complaining about these things given the amazing opportunities that I've had in my life. My native language is English, which is the world's lingua franca at the moment. I'm educated, I'm able-bodied, and I also benefit every single day from a strong family support system. And I'm not trying to diminish my privilege in any way, or try to act like there aren't people in the world who have it a lot worse than I do, because obviously there are. But I do want to be honest about my experiences, especially if any of you are considering making a decision like this and moving your life to a different country. I think it's really important to be honest about what that has meant for me, having done it, so that you can make the best decision possible. I want to be honest about my experience regardless of anything, and the truth is that you can't expect a change of scenery to give you purpose. That's a lesson that I had to learn the hard way, as with every single lesson I've learned. I always have to learn things the hard way, but now hopefully I can pass on that knowledge to you and you don't have to do things the hard way. I've done this so many times where I've thought like, oh, if I just lost some weight, or if I got this tattoo, or if I cut my hair, or whatever, like if I change something about my appearance, it's gonna fix the thing that's wrong or that's broken on the inside. And it never works. But I mean, I do have good tattoos out of it, but what was I talking about again? Number 3, the importance of community. So I left pretty much everyone that I know back in the US when I moved to Germany, like I said before, which meant that I didn't really have anyone here that I could talk to or that I could build community with aside from Brady. And he and I figured out pretty quickly that one person is actually not enough, even if it's the best person in the world. I can't expect one person to fulfill all of my social needs. It's not healthy, it's not sustainable, and it's kind of codependent, which that's not the formula that I want our relationship to follow. But luckily for me, Hanover was a big enough city to have a pretty sizable English-speaking community in it already, and we were able to plug into that a lot by going to English-speaking meetup groups. We made friends who spoke English and were kind and cool and funny, and they were really patient with us, which is really nice. And those people, honestly, a godsend, and communities like that exist for expats and immigrants in foreign countries, so helpful. I'm so thankful for them. However, the university town where we're living now, which is where Brady is going to get his master's degree and where I will also shortly be getting my master's degree as well, it's significantly smaller, and there's not as big of an expat community here, aside from students. And so I, not being a student yet, have had a harder time plugging into communities or finding and connecting with people who speak English, who fulfill that social need for me and make this feel more like home. And that's been really difficult, a lot more difficult than I thought it was gonna be. Again, in keeping with the theme of this video. I haven't been back to the US since I moved to Germany in December of 2016. And even though I visited my mom and my sister in England, and they've come to visit me, it's really difficult to feel like I can't be part of a larger community. And that's compounded by the language barrier, but it's also not helped by the fact that my job now is a freelance writer, and I work from home, so I don't have the opportunity to meet people in a work environment. I am just at home. It turns out that even as introverted as I am a lot of the time, I do really need a community in order to thrive. But in order for me to really feel like I belong here and like I'm growing and thriving and everything, I need a community. And so that's been an unexpected challenge for me, and that has also definitely contributed to my experiences with culture shock since I've moved to Germany. Number 4, in keeping with my very emo, not semi-serious theme here at all, it turns out, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, probably should change that. Number 4, loneliness is real. So this is about to be like super, probably TMI, very personal stuff, but for me, an aspect of culture shock and something about living in a new country that I definitely didn't expect was what it was going to mean for my mental health. To feel so isolated and alone for such a long period of time and for such a sustained period of time. Even though we've only been living in Bavaria for 4 months, it's still a significant chunk of time to feel like you don't really belong and like you don't really have a purpose. It really grates on your soul, and the reason that I feel like I can talk about this is because I have personally experienced it, and I experienced some pretty severe levels of depression and anxiety after leaving the communities that I was able to be a part of in Hanover. Even though I love it here. I love where we live, I love our apartment, I love this town, it's fantastic, and Brady's university and his master's program is so perfect for him. And I honestly wouldn't change a thing about this town or this experience, except I wish either that I were better in German, or that there were a larger community of English speakers here that I could kind of connect with and make friends with, because it's hard. It's so hard. It's so hard feeling like you don't have friends and feeling like you don't have, that you don't have a community and you don't have a purpose and you don't belong. Like, now I'm just complaining again. I'm sorry. I really want to be honest, and I want to be open about this experience and these feelings and the challenges and the difficulties, because as wonderful and fantastic and beautiful and blessed as this life that I'm living is, there are a lot of moments where you just cry. You just have to cry. Like, you feel alone, and it's not easy. And that's, like, I'm not saying that that's bad necessarily. How else are we supposed to grow if you don't challenge yourself, if you don't push your limits? But honestly, it's difficult. It's a lot more difficult than I thought it was gonna be. And that's one of the things that I do wish I would have known before making the decision to move out here, because maybe I would have been a little bit more patient with myself. You know, maybe I would have been kinder to myself. Maybe I could have prepared myself a little bit better for receiving disappointment or feeling like these interactions are failures. You know, I don't like feeling like my interactions with people are failures, even if they are like awkward and cringy and whatever. I wish I would have known that, if only because I would have liked to have given myself more opportunities to have grace rather than beat myself up after venturing out in public. And that leads me into number 5. It is definitely an object lesson in celebrating life's little victories, these little successes. I really didn't expect how much or how often or how meaningful making little achievements was gonna be for me. Like, there are these little milestones, and if you've lived in a foreign country, especially one where there's a language barrier, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. I hope. I hope I'm not the only one that does this, but making a call in the local language, going to an event and having fun, ordering at a restaurant in the local language, writing a letter, reading a letter, understanding a joke. That, for me, that was awesome. I was on a tour in this castle, and this guy made a joke about, it was toilet humor, but he made a joke about it, and I understood it, and I was like, wanted to have a party. And I just basically looked around and was laughing with all of the other people in my tour group, and I was like, we all got that joke. And of course there are big milestones like getting an apartment or getting a job or getting accepted to a university, and those are all obviously worth celebrating. But I think a lot of times, especially when we're in our own culture, when we're in our own communities, it's easy to overlook these little victories because they don't feel like victories. But when you're trying to navigate a new culture and a new set of ideals, or a new language, these are actually really important. It's really important for you to celebrate these things because it is a measure of success. You are progressing, you are getting better, and you're moving forward, and you're growing, and that's awesome, and that's so cool, and you should absolutely celebrate those things. Like, even if it is just like looking around at people and being like, we're all in it together, and we're all here together, and we're experiencing this, and we're connected. And that sounds really hokey, but it's important. I feel like that's pretty much what my channel is gonna end up being, is just me like looking at the camera and being like, take care of yourself, it's important. Celebrate yourself, it's important. Anyway, yeah. Those are the top 5 things that I wish I would have known about before I moved to a foreign country, picked up my life, and put it down in a different place. If you have had a similar or a different experience with culture shock, leave a comment down below about your experience. If you have an idea for a video that you'd like to see, leave a comment down below, etc, etc. Yeah, I'm hoping to start uploading on a weekly basis, so definitely subscribe if you like my content, because you will be getting a lot more of it in the future. Actually, 2018 is going to be a year of a lot of changes for me, hopefully, and I'd love for you guys to come along. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video.